It's crazy that this week will be the 58th Super Bowl in the NFL's history. I mean, I remember the first like it was yesterday. Alright, I'm just kidding, but since January 15, 1967, which was the date of the very first Super Bowl, where the Green Bay Packers and, funnily enough, the Kansas City Chiefs faced off in a game called the AFL-NFL World Championship game. But since this very first Super Bowl, the game has evolved and there has been tons of memorable performances that took place on the biggest stage in football. And today, I want to go through and talk about some of the greatest Super Bowl performances in NFL history. If you want more NFL content like this every single week, make sure you go ahead and leave a like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss a video. But let's get right on into the video. Unless you're a very casual watcher of football or don't really pay attention to the sport at all, you would know that Jerry Rice is widely regarded as the best receiver to ever play in the NFL. And when you look at his stats compared to the field of receivers that played before and after Rice hung up his cleats, you would know that no one even comes close statistically. But maybe his greatest achievement in his illustrious career with the 49ers is his Super Bowl MVP trophy that he won in 1989 from Super Bowl 23 against the Cincinnati Bengals. This honestly is one of the most iconic Super Bowls in the history of the NFL, as it was the first that Rice and Montana won together and the first of their back-to-back rings in San Francisco, with this stretch in the late 80s and early 90s being the one that cemented them as an NFL dynasty. Rice and Montana this game were on fire, and Montana threw for 357 yards and 2 touchdowns, but Rice stole the show as he put up 215 yards and a touchdown on 11 receptions. This game is most notable for the final drive where Rice and Montana connected on 2nd and 20 to put the Niners in position to tie or take the lead after being down a touchdown heading into the fourth quarter. Montana capped off the drive with a 10-yard touchdown pass to part-time car salesman John Taylor, and no, that isn't a joke. He used to sell cars in the offseason, but this drive forever went down in NFL history as the famous drive. And while Montana played a great game, Jerry Rice put up a still standing record of 215 receiving yards in the game, and no one has even come within 50 yards of this record since this game. Rice may have won 3 Super Bowls, and he only won 1 Super Bowl MVP, but this was not due to poor performance, as the man put up almost 600 yards and 8 touchdowns in his 4 Super Bowl appearances, including a 77-yard and 1 touchdown game with the Raiders in 2002 when he was 40 years old. But the reason he never won this award again was because the year after he won Super Bowl MVP, Joe Montana decided to go absolutely insane in what might be the most lopsided Super Bowl game in the history of the game, as the Denver Broncos lost by a remarkable 45 points to the 49ers, and after a 7-3 start in the first quarter, almost no one could have predicted the final score to shake out the way it did. Montana would never be the starting quarterback for a Super Bowl game for the rest of his career, as the 49ers moved off from him soon after this game, but Montana might have had the greatest Super Bowl performance ever in the 24th Super Bowl, as he threw for a ridiculous 297 yards and 5 passing touchdowns. The most impressive part of this game is the fact that the offense did not miss a beat, as Montana had a 75% completion percentage, only throwing 7 incomplete passes all game, and had 0 interceptions in the game. He also had a near-perfect QBR, and Montana obviously won the Super Bowl MVP for his performance, but this would be the last of his 4 Super Bowl wins, and after this game, he was widely regarded as the greatest player in NFL history, until another quarterback that will be mentioned later in this video came along. After a well-documented quarterback controversy, Joe Montana was shipped out of San Francisco due to Steve Young winning MVP in his first full season as a starter, and the 49ers would be dominant once again. But after losing to Dallas a few times in a row in the early 90s, many questioned if keeping Steve Young and trading Montana was the right answer, as ever since the controversy started, the 49ers did not bring home any hardware. Steve Young and the 49ers would go on to demolish Dallas in the NFC Championship game, and would go on to the Super Bowl versus the San Diego Chargers in their very first Super Bowl appearance. But the Chargers' first and only Super Bowl appearance was not too kind to them, as they got blown out of the water. Steve Young threw for 325 yards and 6 touchdowns, as well as rushing for 49 yards and having a 134.8 quarterback rating. It honestly could be argued that Steve Young had the greatest performance in Super Bowl history, as no one else has ever thrown for 6 touchdowns in a Super Bowl. The 49ers may have won in dominating fashion, but it certainly does not take away from the game Steve Young played. This would be the last of the 49ers' 5 championships, But after the legendary 1994 season with Dion being there for that one season and also winning Defensive Player of the Year and winning their first championship with Joe Montana, the 49ers would go 0-2 in the Super Bowl since that win and have a chance to get their first Super Bowl since 1995 this Sunday versus the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes once again. Kurt Warner is one of the greatest Super Bowl performers in the history of the NFL. Even though his career record in the Super Bowl was 1-2, he came to play in every single Super Bowl he played in and put his team in position to win. However, the first Super Bowl he played in had to have been his best. In 1999, the greatest show on turf set the NFL on fire all year, but the Super Bowl was probably the most evenly matched game they played all season, and one of the closest Super Bowls ever versus the Tennessee Titans. Kurt put up 414 yards and 2 touchdowns with 0 interceptions thrown, and this was a Super Bowl record at the time for passing yards. But Warner's performance was pretty much forgotten, as Super Bowl 34 would be remembered for Kevin Dyson being 1 yard short on the final play of the game to tie the game up and possibly send the Super Bowl into its first ever overtime. Kurt played a decent game versus the Patriots 2 years later, especially turning it up in the second half, but they came up short after Brady and Belichick had their first game-winning drive in the Super Bowl, and Santonio Holmes' toe tap after a 377-yard and 3-touchdown performance in 2009 by Kurt Warner spoiled everything and ruined Kurt Warner's comeback in Arizona, as well as spoiling one of the greatest underdog playoff runs in NFL history. The Baltimore Ravens, the year after Kevin Dyson came up a yard short, could have given the Super Bowl MVP trophy to their entire defense. After a legendary 2000 season where they gave up only 10.3 points per game, which is an NFL record to this day and will never be done again, especially with the way the NFL offenses can push the ball down the field in the modern day. The Ravens forced the Giants into 5 turnovers, including 4 interceptions and 1 fumble lost. The Ravens ended up winning 34-7, holding the Giants to the 3rd fewest points scored in Super Bowl history at the time, and Ray Lewis took home the Super Bowl MVP trophy. But really, he won it for being the leader of the greatest defense in NFL history. Hurricane Katrina was a tragedy that ravaged the city of New Orleans, and in 2005, the future of most of their pro sport teams was uncertain. New Orleans teams were not really known for winning much, but after a trade with the San Diego Chargers for Pro Bowl quarterback Drew Brees, the Saints seemed to have new life. In 2006, Brees and the Saints went all the way to the NFC Championship game, but after 2 seasons where they missed the playoffs, but Brees played like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL in these years, including a 5,000-yard season, the Saints were able to finally put it all together in 2009, winning 13 games and being the first seed in the NFC. Brees had a great first 2 games in the playoff run, but the Super Bowl was a different stage against the NFL's MVP Peyton Manning and the best offense in the NFL, with all of New Orleans relying on Drew Brees and the Saints to take the Lombardi home. Brees ended up finishing with one of the most efficient performances in Super Bowl history, as he went 32 of 39 and threw for 288 yards and 2 touchdowns, of course throwing 0 picks. Brees finished with an 82% completion rate and played a flawless game. Brees also had to lead a comeback down 0-10, but after a Tracy Porter pick 6 to go up 31-17, the dream was realized as Drew Brees brought the city of New Orleans their very first Super Bowl trophy in Super Bowl 44. You're probably surprised to not have heard Tom Brady's name until this point, but he's arguably the greatest Super Bowl performer in NFL history. Even though many would give the nod to Montana because he never had any games where his stats were not elite in the big game, whereas Brady had games where he did not have to do that much as his team was either up by a lot or he did enough to win but wasn't putting up crazy numbers like in Super Bowl 53 and 55. But Super Bowl 49 will forever be remembered for Malcolm Butler's interception on the goal line to win the game for the Patriots. But many don't remember that Brady and the Pats were down 10 going into the 4th quarter. After a strike to Danny Amendola in the back of the end zone, Brady hit Edelman on a zig on the goal line to go up 4 points. And after a wild catch by Jermaine Kearse and a run by Marshawn Lynch put the Seahawks at the 1-yard line, they famously tried to run a pig play on the goal line and ironically enough got picked off. And while this was a legendary game, the Patriots' next Super Bowl in my opinion was an even greater performance from Brady. The infamous 28-3 comeback is mentioned every single year when it's Super Bowl week, but for a good reason. It's in contention for the greatest comeback in sports history, and Brady was a huge reason for this. Brady in Super Bowl 51, while trailing by 4 scores for a huge portion of the game, set the all-time yards mark in a Super Bowl with 466 passing yards and threw 2 touchdowns to 1 interception. He was much better in the second half and overtime, as in the 4th quarter and OT alone, he threw for around 250 yards. Not to mention the fact that Brady did not even have Gronk in this game as he was out for the year. But Brady might have had his best performance in a loss the very next year, versus the Eagles in Super Bowl 52 when he broke his Super Bowl record from the previous year, throwing for a ridiculous 505 yards and 3 touchdowns with 0 interceptions. While statistically Super Bowl 52 had the slight edge, with the circumstances and the perfect execution, as well as the fact that they completed the greatest comeback of all time and fired on all cylinders when they needed the offense the most, Super Bowl 51 would be my choice for the greatest performance in Super Bowl history. That's all for this one though, guys. There were a lot of performances that were all-time great that I did not include in this video, so a part 2 is definitely possible at some point. But if you want NFL content like this on a weekly basis, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss a video. Until next time, LLE out.